Conversations with my ex. Yes, it had to end. Dated for 5 years. Now we really good friends. Conversations with my ex. Talking love and life. The dating ins and outs. Sharing some dope advice. We gon' keep it honest. Never hold back with my comments. I done learned a thing or two. So we gotta talk about it. You'll be laughing and vibing. Come through and connect. Never know what to expect. Conversations with my ex. Hey.
Welcome back to Conversations with My Ex. On today's episode, we will be going back to where everything began for each of us, where we grew up, how we grew up. We're going to do a whole tell-all on what made us, us.
Back to our roots, back to the, not necessarily trauma, because I feel like that's a whole different thing, but back to our, just one, our families, two, the environments that we grew up in, and three, kind of just like evaluating how that all affected us in our relationship and then also like in our personal lives.
Yeah, because there's a lot to unpack here. And I don't know, I think nowadays people start to realize how much the way they grew up actually affects them as human beings and their behaviors. But I don't think we all take the time to realize how much it's actually guiding our behaviors. Because up until recently, I didn't even realize, and honestly, I think a lot of it was until I met you, I didn't even realize how much different parenting and just the environment in which you grew up in. And I don't even mean environment as in like household, like that plays a role, but I mean environment as in like geographically. Like all of that plays such a big role in shaping you as a human being and kind of what you care about, what you don't care about, things that are important that aren't so important. Like everything is different. And it's actually very, very fascinating because being together and being so different, I've gained so much life experience because of those things. I don't know if
I feel like I feel like you've definitely exactly that for your on your part, and then for me, I feel like I opened up a different perspective. Like I was able to understand a different perspective and a different light because I feel like before I met you, I didn't really know anyone like you from like a small town like you.
And all I knew was people like me. So.
Yeah, like everyone that I knew or that I came came in close contact with came from big cities: New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, like bigger areas. So
and here I am in the woods.
Yeah,
I am in the woods where
you're up in the boonies.
I would say for you, my like meeting me and going where I grew up and meeting my family and all that stuff. And this isn't in like a negative way. It was like toned down where your lifestyle was more sped up for me, right? It was almost like the opposite. Like you always lived in this kind of fast pace. There's always things going on. Where I grew up in such a small town to where, I don't know, everybody knows everybody. It's kind of a weird.
Yeah. Everybody still knows everybody in a different
kind of way. What, from where you're from?
Yeah.
There's so many people. How is that possible?
It's just possible, believe me. I mean, you know it. Every time I would go out or something, I would run into someone I knew.
That's true. But that's more of like your age demographic, though. I mean, how many people are you?
This is true, but I feel like even though we're a big city, like just word of mouth and people love to gossip, like everybody knows everybody. You may not know them on a personal level, but you know of them. Like you guys know each other more personally over there, I feel. Over here, it's like everybody knows each other, but it depends on the kind of relationship you have with them.
Because I'll say this for over here is, like you said, everyone knows each other on like a maybe not a super personal level, but a more personal level. But you always run into those people who you see and you're like, I know them, but I don't know them too well. Yeah. Do I say hi? Do I not? That's always awkward for me.
I always just say hi, regardless. I always just be like, hey. So there's not even like room for confusion or overthinking.
Yeah, I guess so. And a lot of times you could just be being courteous and doing that, but there's people I see where I know of them.
Unless
I don't know how much they know of me. I don't have no idea. Unless
I don't like fuck with you like that or like have some kind of like something against you, then I will say hi. Which I don't have anything against anyone specifically, I'd say.
So you're saying if you have any kind of like bad blood there, you're not going to obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
Grudges, I guess, would be the word that you would talk there. But yeah, on today's episode, we're going to cover all that stuff. We're going to go into the ins and outs of where we grew up, how we think it affected our relationship, and just some general advice that we've learned throughout this process together of trying to understand someone that's very different from you based on just where you grew up and how you grew up.
Yeah. I'm from Stamford, Connecticut, born and raised in the playground.
It's kind of controversial now, I guess.
And what about you?
Burrillville, Rhode Island, which even people in Rhode Island don't really know where that is. Some people, you'd be surprised how many people you meet inside the tiny state of Rhode Island. Like, it's a small state, and people, I don't even know where that is. It's true. Unless you played us in sports in school, you would not know. It's crazy.
You're literally in the middle of nowhere. I just remember too, like, going and being like, country music playing.
I feel, yeah, a lot of people around here are into I'm not so much. I don't really care for it, but my parents and everybody, my aunt, my uncle.
I'm going to do some research really quickly because I want to see, this mic is in my way that I can't, the population comparison to Stamford. So
my guess would be about 17,000 here.
So Stamford has a population. This is 2021, so it's completely updated, but it's pretty.
This is only the people who do the consensus or the census, whatever the hell that survey is called.
Yeah, yep. 136,309 people.
Okay. Honestly, that's a little bit smaller than I thought.
Well, I feel like there's definitely a lot more, but so let's see. Population of Burrillville, Rhode Island. And you're pretty 17. Yeah, you're right on point. 16,740. So
I gave us a little bit more credit. And the way I know that it's a small town, especially compared, I mean, I have a town, I don't have it, I don't own it. Yeah, you're in a city. But you had multiple high schools. We only had one, and my graduating class had about a little over 100 kids in it. And the entire high school at one time probably had less than 400. So just to gauge the sheer magnitude of the difference between the two places is like, how many kids were in your graduating class in your high school? And I would assume it's probably about the same in the other high school, because I know you said there was 2 high schools in town. You either went to one or the other, right?
Yeah, I have no idea. It was a lot more than that. I'm going to look it up right now. What's also graduating?
Doing all this Google research. I remember when you told me that there was 2 high schools and
more than 2 high schools. We've got.
Was it just 2 public schools?
2 public high schools. Yeah. But then you had AITE, which was like a tech engineering school. Then you had Stanford Academy, which was for the bad kids. And then you had, there was a few more. What is it saying here?
Yeah, we only had the one. We have 2 elementary. I mean, well, I guess 3 elementary schools, but.
So for the public school review, it says, so I don't know. Okay, so it says enrollment, 2,236 students. I'm assuming for the whole.
That'd be for the whole school, yeah. So just, I mean, you don't have to go into this crazy research, but that's just a little bit of a taste of, you had over 2,000 people enrolled in the school, and we had about around 400 maybe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the reason why everybody knows everybody around here. And I'll get into it a little bit about, like, the town is, I feel like there's 2 types of people, and this is like on a super broad scale. There's 2 types of people that I think are from my hometown. There's people who grow up here and leave. And then there's people who grow up here, stay here, raise their families here. And then those
generations
and then they have a choice of, I'm going to stay or I'm going to leave. And I think it just kind of trickles down that way. And I feel like I know a lot more people that stay than leave.
Yeah, which is interesting to me. Which is very interesting to me.
The people who do leave, though, I noticed that they do thrive, which is understandable.
I mean, look, I love your hometown. There is a lot of beauty to it and a lot of uniqueness to it compared to what I'm used to. You know, it is very peaceful and and honestly, your town has a lot of nice people. Like, you run into a lot more nice people than mean people. That's for sure. People just have a good, everyone's just like a neighbor to each other. Everybody, like, you know, helps each other out, and they're just nice.
Yeah, there's a lot of friendly people, a lot of drunk people.
I
The
feel like
other
that's
thing
why
I will
everybody's
say,
so nice because they're always drunk.
maybe, but like we said on our last episode, there's always angry drunks. And there are some of those people that you got to look out for. But I mean, around here, everybody has their bar and they go to that bar. Like the people who are over 21 that remained here, that's what they do. They have their watering hole and they usually don't deviate from that watering hole. It's like, this is our spot. You know who you're going to see almost every time you go in there. And there's bars that I just won't, I have never stepped foot in Barterville, like not a single time. But yeah, no, that's what it is. It's
I
100%
just
that
remember
way.
having such a different idea of when you said, like, oh, we're going to go out to the bars around here. Like, the vision that I had for it was so much different than what I actually
Tell me.
experienced. And
I wanna
everyone,
know.
one big difference is definitely like how casual people dress. For sure. Like, if you were to tell someone in Stanford on a Friday night, even a Thursday night, hey, we're going out for dinner and drinks or whatever, you're not going to get super dressed up, but you're going to, like, you're going to
Yeah.
get a little dressed up.
You'd get weird
We're
looks if you
talking
dressed to the nines over here.
people are in hoodies and sweats type vibe. Like, there's one thing to be casual, like have jeans and like a you know, like a blouse, but people are in blouse. People are in sweats.
The one thing I don't do is I don't go out in sweats. I won't do that. But hoodie and jeans, and if I don't feel like doing my hair, it's a hat. Like,
Yeah.
because, like you said, it's so casual. Like, you'd actually get weird looks if you came in there like with a blazer. Like, you'd be like, "The fuck's this guy?"
But this is interesting too, because this isn't just in small towns like Burrillville. Like in San Diego, I noticed too that people don't dress up as much. It's different for like nights out, but it's very like beach boho hippie.
Yep.
People are in shorts and like a tank and chilling with their, you know, with their sandals, like very, very low key and chill. And like one of my friends Brooke that I visited, her brother was like, it's nice to see someone actually dress up and make an effort. Cause like I came and like dressed up every night, regardless of what we were doing. Like I was just like, and he was just like, it's nice to see somebody actually like put in effort. Cause you don't get that around there. So those are the vibes over there. Just casual.
Yeah, it's because it's like you said, it's like that beach town. Everyone goes there. It's all laid back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's understandable that people are going to dress super casual. And for me, I like a good balance of I want to fit in if I'm casual, but I like dressing up. I do. And I think maybe I like to do it more often because I don't get to do it often. Maybe that's why I like it more, is because it's more rare for me to have or be placed in the situation in which I'm going to be dressed up or look a little nicer.
You just feel more put together.
Look
and
good,
I feel like you just, I feel like you just, so Stanford on another note is a big city, 2 big major high schools, and then more on top of that. Going out, there were a ton of places to go out. People would definitely dress up. People would dress up more when we were younger because we were underage going in and like having to doll up a little more.
Yeah.
So you notice that people definitely overdress more than they underdress here. Yeah. But yeah, there's a ton of restaurants to choose from, ton of bars to choose from. You know, good crowd of people. You definitely get sick of it after a while. Like, especially, I appreciated Stanford a lot more when I left it. Like when I went to Rhode Island and lived in Rhode Island for a little while. Like that's when I learned to appreciate Stanford. And now I'm back. I'm recently back. It hasn't been too long that I've been back. And I definitely still appreciate it and like to go out, but you know, I'm getting to that point now where I'm just like getting over it. But in the summertime, I like to go to New York anyway, so it'll work out in my favor.
Yeah, so I always enjoyed going to, and I can echo that sentiment that you just said. Like when you leave, you appreciate it more. It's the same thing with me, even in the small town living.
Yeah.
When I moved down there, it was exciting because, like you said, you had a plethora of just bars and restaurants, and they're nicer and not throwing shade at the bars and restaurants where I grew up. But like you said, it's more casual.
It's a different vibe. It's a whole different
vibe. Very
you can't compare the two.
Yeah,
you really
can't. So the vibe that I get, and as an outsider, and it may hit differently to you, or you may be like, oh, okay, I don't know if you look at it this way because it's what you've known for most of your life. But when I'm in Stanford or Norwalk or like, you have all those areas surrounding Stanford.
Yeah, because it's not just, you have Westport, you have Darien, you have Norwalk, you have New Canaan,
and they're all
have little
upscale.
downtowns.
They're all like upscale, and not saying that there's not holes in the wall. I'm sure there's plenty of holes in the wall, like dive bars and things of that nature.
But for the most part,
I look at that as I'm going to go out and order a cocktail. And there probably are some places around where I grew up where you can do that, but I have never once done it because around here everyone just really drinks beer when you go out to a bar. A bar is let's go out and have a bunch of beer.
You
And
would
the
not catch me
experience
getting a cocktail at Gators. I'll tell you that.
that's not even in Barville.
Probably don't even know how to. Still in the area.
But that's
so. What
my
would
thing,
be the
is
bar? How many bars are in Burrillville specifically?
oh, geez. I mean, let's see. Honestly, the best thing, and this is still beer, the brewery was like one of the best things that happened. But bars, I don't know. There's definitely 10 plus bars for sure, but they're all
Okay.
dive bars. There's a few that are a little bit more upscale. And when I say upscale for the area, like you wouldn't find that to be a super upscale restaurant in like, or a bar in like Providence or Cranston or something of
No,
that
yeah. So
nature. But for the area, it's like night and day difference. You know what I mean?
I feel like these environments have affected us both in our personal lives and then also in our relationships.
Oh yeah.
And definitely the lifestyles too that we have, which is all based down upon where we're from. So let's talk about your dynamic when it comes to your family, how your parents were, your dynamic
Yeah.
with your sibling. Like if you want to start off with getting into detail about that.
Yeah. And I can just on this topic of just the town and the area, when I speak about this, I think that not just here, but anywhere has those pros and cons, right? You're going to find an area where there's so many great things that you love about it, but there's also a lot of things that I'm not so crazy about. And I'm not here placing blame or throwing negative at anything, but I feel like growing up in a small town, and I know that you said that even there, everybody knows everybody, but there's this thing that I like to think about as a small town mentality, where around here, it feels like a lot of people who remained here, like grew up here and then remained here, are a little bit more closed-minded because they haven't seen much of the outside world besides this place, which was me for a majority of my life and until I met you, which I'm super grateful for having that experience to be able to live here, but also live down there with you. And we'll get into family background and how your family background was a big positive for me as well. Um, but you almost get into this small town mentality of everybody knows everything. So you almost want to choose more of a safe route. You're not that it's frowned upon. No one's really putting you down for being super ambitious, but it's almost like you feel, and this could just be me thinking this personally, it almost feels like people are trying to say, hey, I don't want you to, that sounds negative. Not that they don't want you to succeed.
They don't really
but
want to risk take. They rather be
yeah,
secure in their career. Because I noticed that about your parents a lot. Like
yeah,
of course, they want you to have a good paying job, but they rather you have more of a secure job that you know is gonna be there and take care of you and just be
yeah,
like make even if you have to just make the bare minimum, it's cool with them. And you have to stay consistent and stay. Like I feel like it's almost not frowned down upon, but like if a better opportunity were to come, let's say, I feel
yeah,
like your parents would be more like, well, stick with what you're more comfortable with and what's gonna. So that's kind of what the
yeah.
mindset is, which isn't a bad thing, but it
No.
does, I feel like, tend to hold people back.
And it's something I've had to work through a lot over the past couple of years, more or less over the last 8 to 10 years. I know you've seen a big jump of it over the last 5-ish, because I definitely went through a lot of, I don't know if transformation's the right word, but was able to see and experience more different things, which put a lot of stuff into perspective. Because like I said, I grew up here. You got that small town mentality. People aren't super open-minded. Like you said, my parents are the best. I love my parents. They're fantastic people. They're the most generous, loving, kind
They
people.
really
I've
are.
never seen them fight a day in their life. That doesn't mean that they don't argue and that they don't get on top of each other about certain things and get after it, but they never did it in front of us. They also did a few things that was good for young Jared as a child, but maybe not so well translating into adult Jared. What I mean by that is my parents, and I think like this goes back to your sentiment of, you know, that small town closed minded, is Barville's a relatively safe area where you never feel like you're gonna have to worry about anything walking up and down the street. I'm not recommending you leave your
I'm
doors
surprised
unlocked, but you feel like
well,
you
I was just
could.
gonna say, I'm surprised that your family does lock their doors the way they did because I
We
never
used to
feel like
never. We used to never. And you kind of get into that mentality of, okay, this place is safe. And they didn't come out and so much say this as much as it was kind of felt as every place but here, be careful. Every time I left the house, be careful. And it almost gives you this worry wart mentality of, oh my God, everywhere that's unfamiliar is dangerous. And that limits you and kind of keeps you in a box, which hurts your ambition a bit. Now, don't get me wrong, my parents are super supportive. Anything I want to do, they'll support me, but they're also going to push back on a lot of things because, like you said, they preach security, they preach being safe, they preach certainty, uh, all of these things, which, don't get me wrong, these things are important, but to a certain extent, when it starts becoming detrimental. And I don't sit here and say, oh, I'm the way I am because my parents did
And
this
we're
wrong,
not
this wrong, this
bashing
wrong.
them. We're not
No,
bashing them
not
at
at
all
all.
because they're amazing people and they've done a great job and they're nothing but good human beings. But that still doesn't mean that certain things that they did affected you negatively, you know?
Yeah. And
I'd rather have your situation than mine.
But yeah, and we can come down to even just a few examples of this. And there's a certain things that I wish my parents would have done when I was younger. Not to say they did a poor job at all, because they taught me great things. And I think a lot of my personality, or at least the important parts of my character,
Your
I got from my
morals and your
parents.
values definitely
Yes.
come from your family, and that's the most important thing. And they're very deep rooted, good people. They really are.
And
They care about others. They don't judge
oh, certainly.
people.
Nope.
They're really good people.
And they always brought me up to be respectful of others, be kind of others, and give love to others. And I've always
They're
lived
very
that way.
generous. Very
Super generous.
Too generous.
Yeah, I was gonna say in some cases you could say too generous. But and I look at and I understand that generations, it changes. Every parent usually wants to improve on what their childhood was. So not that my dad had a bad childhood, but you know, economic standpoints are different. And growing up, he always had to do work around the house. Not saying that I'm lazy, but my dad didn't really get that childhood experience. So he gave that all to me when it came to playing sports. And I was playing hockey year round around the calendar. And they were super generous with being able. That's an expensive sport. They paid for everything. They let me travel. They would take time out of work. They'd leave work and bring me to practice. And until I get older, you don't realize how much of a sacrifice that is to be able to, Saturdays you're playing. During the week after they get out of work and I get out of school, they're bringing me to practice. When I was in high school, I traveled with the team on a bus, but my dad also coached. And the one thing I always noticed, and I didn't realize this at the time because to me it was always normal, was if my dad had a game the same night that I did and he was coaching that team, which was my sister's team, my mom would go to that game, my game. She would drive all the way down to like Newport. She would drive an hour just to go sit in a freezing
They
rink.
were very supportive. They've always been very supportive.
Yes. But I will say, I had to battle through a lot of anxiety about different places because of hey, this place, we don't know about it, or we hear just the echoing bad shit that's on the news. So don't ever venture into this area or be careful. And that's really been something that I've had to work through. And I know that you know that too, because you were there for a lot of it. And I think after meeting my family,
for sure,
after meeting my family, you kind of understand where that came from.
Yes.
Where it wasn't just me being unreasonable. It was, I don't know any different. This is what I've always been told. And when it's what you've always been told, you believe that to be the truth. And when you believe that to be the truth, it's going to govern all of your behaviors.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
It's just the way it is.
That's exactly what happened with you with certain things. It is what it is. It's not like you have horrible things about you. It's all relatively normal things.
Yeah.
But it definitely did affect our relationship with certain things. And since I'm like just the complete opposite, I'm just a carefree, go with the flow, risk taker, don't hold back. Like I am like your family's
polar
almost
opposite.
Like biggest nightmare.
Polar opposite. Seriously. I honestly think the way we grew up, polar opposite.
Completely. Yeah. And you come from a very healthy dynamic to look
too healthy.
Yeah, like your role models were healthy. Yes, too healthy, but honestly, it's still beautiful that that's what it is. So, yeah, my family dynamic is completely different. And I think it definitely has to do with also how my parents both came from such different places, like foreign places. So my parents met as exchange students in college, and they met. My dad is from Bangladesh, my mom is Puerto Rican. So growing up, it was a very cultural household as well, which is very different from yours. Not that your family doesn't have culture, but it's a very American culture. Like they have cultures. Culture is your culture. It doesn't have to be an exotic culture, but it's a culture nonetheless. Yeah. And your family does have a lot of nice family traditions too, which I really enjoyed. But so I am used to more chaos. I am used to more conflict. I am used to more of like a war zone. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to sit here and say my childhood was tragic and traumatic and, was horrible. I did not have a horrible childhood. Was it an ideal childhood? No, but it wasn't horrible. I wasn't abused. I wasn't beat up. I had food. I was fed. I had a roof over my head. We were always taken care of, but I never had a healthy marriage as a role model. It was constant conflict with my parents, and from the youngest age, I just always remember them fighting. It wouldn't be anything insane, but there was always fighting. There was always arguing. There was always debate about finances. Finances was a huge just issue in my parents' marriage.
You see that with a lot of, I think, not to cut you off, but I feel like a lot of relationships, that's a big problem is not agreeing on financial matters.
And everybody assumed that the reason why they ended up getting divorced was because of their cultures and those differences, and that they couldn't really mesh those two cultures together. But that was actually the complete opposite. My mom meshed so well with my dad's culture. My dad loves Puerto Rico. He kind of struggled a little bit with getting used to that Latina lifestyle because he doesn't drink. Yeah. And he's not really like that going out kind of guy. He's more of a homebody as well. But they still respected each other's cultures, religions, things like that. They were very understanding of that. Like my mom still drank, even though my dad didn't drink. My mom would come to the mosque or like pray. My mom brought my dad into that whole community of people in Stanford in the area. So like they were just always,
oh really?
Yeah, my mom was the one that brought him into that group.
Oh.
So yeah, because my mom had a really good Palestinian friend who was Muslim, who she knew from like me and her daughter were friends from like daycare. And she introduced him like, oh, tell your husband about this group. And then, so my mom was the reason why he got into it. And he still to this day is with that same group of people. So we definitely had there was a stage from like, I'd say like 6 to like, I think 5 to 10, I think we're very peaceful. It was a united family. We were traveling a lot. My dad had a really good job. My mom had a really good job. It was just a way better situation because we did go from struggling financially to then both of my parents both bringing in a decent amount of income to the house. Yeah. And then after that, it kind of just went downhill. So in that period of time, though, when things were good, we were traveling. We were always trying new things. It was a nice dynamic. But then once they moved into their first house that we all moved into, things just kind of went downhill. So I think that my upbringing definitely made me more numb to like certain arguments, for example, or certain like issues with you. Like I didn't take it as seriously just because I was so used to conflict. I was so used to,
and I'm
like
not.
To me, it was just like, oh, this
will blow over. This is no big deal. And to me, because I never witnessed that or experienced that, any little argument to me was the end of the world because my role models for a healthy relationship was, hey, my parents don't argue. They probably do, but at the time, if you don't see it, it's not in your world. Mm-hmm. And if it's not in your world, it's not in your realm of possibilities of this is something that I'm going to have to deal with. This is what it looks like. And if it's not a mirror image of this, it's wrong or it's not healthy. So and that was unhealthy for me.
Yeah, it definitely amplified your reaction to certain things because you went immediately to like
doom and gloom.
Flight mode,
oh my god!
Like, like this is the end. You're gonna end things with me. You're gonna break up with me or something. So I feel
and that was more early on. I think once we kind of learned each other and I got to experience and see your background a little bit, I think that's when things got a little okay.
When you got to know my family, I think it also just same thing with you puts a lot of things into perspective. And my family's a lot of fun. They're great people. I love my family. but
I do too. I love your family as well.
it's just chaos. Chaos is the
Yeah,
perfect word to just
chaos. Yeah, which
depict
we
it
did
all.
say in our first episode when, when we were moving, we were like the chaos. It was the chaos of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I know
And
um, that was also another thing when I met you. And I know you have more story to tell, but the traveling, that was the other thing that was not a part of myself growing up. Like I
yeah,
traveled, but like within New England for like hockey tournaments and then Disney World. I really didn't go anywhere else. And you, I remember when I met you and I was like, I don't know if I ever told you this. I'm going to say this right now. There was a part of me when I met you, because you lived this type of lifestyle and you were able to, you went out, you saw the world. I know you said that, oh yeah, even though it's not an exotic culture, it's still a culture. But in my mind, there's no culture here and there's all culture over there. And I'm so out of the loop with that stuff. I actually had a great deal of insecurity thinking she's traveled and seen the world. I haven't seen shit. And it almost made me feel worse about myself, which I know is my own problem. That has nothing to do with you. But that was also something I had to work through when we first met, because I remember you like, oh, I've done this, I've done that, I've seen this. And I'm like, I haven't seen anything.
I know, because like I've been to China, Turkey, Bangladesh, all different types of places in the Caribbean, all over the country. Like it was
Yep.
just, yeah. So I can definitely see it being a little intimidating and a little like, damn, what have I seen? But I
Yeah.
feel like that never, like I never felt like you weren't cultured necessarily. I just felt like you just needed someone to kind of show you like there's more to life than this little town here, buddy. Like there's more out there. And you knew that because
So,
you were someone that you're
yeah.
someone that reads a lot.
Yeah.
You read a lot, you know you're insightful, so you knew that there was more out there, but I think that it was just more of a culture shock for you for
It
when it came to me.
was. It 100% was. And I think the one thing I'll say and give myself a pat on the back for is I'm, and I always have been, a very open-minded person.
Yeah.
So even though I was lacking the cultural experience, like I haven't experienced it, but I was very open to it all. I was very open to learn about all of it. I was very eager to learn about all of it.
In the beginning you were a little overwhelmed for sure. And
Oh,
then
because I didn't know.
I think it got exciting for you because I do
Yeah.
remember a few times when we like went on like our first sushi date and you've never had sushi before, and like we
Oh
went to a
yeah.
restaurant where we like sat on the floor and it was like a whole authentic experience. It kind of threw you off a little bit. Like I remember
Oh
that
yeah.
night you were a little like not there all the way. Like you were anxious and your vibe was just different. So it
Yeah.
definitely affected certain things. But then I got to a point where you started getting more comfortable with things and trying new foods and going to places that you weren't used to going to. Then you started getting excited about it because you were like, okay, well, it's not as bad as I thought it was.
And I think the biggest thing for me in those situations goes back to the same thing I just said about not being well traveled and you being well traveled, was you're super comfortable in this environment. And a lot of this happened early on because we were still, even though we've been dating, I would even say for the first year and a half to 2 years, you're still really getting to know each other in that
Oh,
portion.
yeah.
Like you feel like you know each other very well, but you really don't. And you were
I feel like the
very
first three
cultured.
years is
Yeah,
when
it's just
you're
learning. It's
still
learning about
learning.
each other and feeling each other out. But you were very cultured. You were very well traveled. I wasn't any of those things. So when we got into those environments and you were super comfortable in those environments and I wasn't, nowadays, I think I have gotten to the point where that wouldn't bother me anymore. None of that would bother me anymore. But at the time, it's still kind of fresh in the relationship a little bit, to where you're still kind of fighting for, I want to make sure this thing lasts. So you get a little in your head and a little insecure of, I don't fit in here. Am I going to be just tossed away? Which isn't the reality, but I think that that's a genuine thought that people have when they are experiencing such different cultures. Now, I understand people listening are probably like, sushi, really? How is that big of a deal?
It was a big deal for you. You never had sushi.
And
And
it
then
wasn't
if
even
you,
just the
for someone
sushi. It
that's
was
never
just,
had in the whole experience too, like
yes.
going in there and it was a BYOB, so we brought our own alcohol and we were sitting on the floor and when we took our shoes, like it was a
Yeah.
and it was like one thing after the other. And like I didn't know that I needed to mentally prepare you for that because to me it was just like, all right, word, we're getting sushi.
Yeah.
So like that's why when I was just like I was asking you so many questions, and I was like, are you okay? Are you good? Like you don't seem like you're fine. And I feel like in your head you were just like, whoa, like sushi's one thing, but this is a whole different
a whole different level.
world.
And I think the other thing too is like you were good with chopsticks, you knew how to use them. I've never even tried to use them before. So
I'm
now
really
I'm
not
just
good at
there.
chopsticks though. I still freaking suck. But
I
no,
mean,
I
but
can use them.
you're better than I was, obviously. So I was sitting there also, that's also gets in your head of I look like an idiot. And not
Yeah.
that I'm at a point where
You're
I'm
the type
trying
of
to
person
impress
that
you, but
you're the type of person that tells yourself these things when they're not actually true.
yeah. I mean, I've gotten a lot better at that because I've put in a
Yeah.
lot of work and aware. Like that wouldn't bother me now because I think, and this is another thing I don't know if we ever talked about. When I was a little bit younger, and I think this happens with a lot of people, you're a little bit more ego driven. And I'm not so ego driven anymore because I'm okay with saying I don't know something. And that's okay. If you've never experienced it, no one expects you to know those things. And I realized as you get older that people don't look down on you for not knowing things. You've just never experienced it. So why are they going to judge you for not knowing it?
And now that
But at
you
the
have
time,
experienced a lot more, so
yeah,
comparing
nothing
to who you
phases
were
me
when we
really.
started dating, you're a lot more confident now because you've
Yeah,
you've
experience things.
experienced a lot more. So you're just a whole different person, honestly. You are a completely different person now than the person I dated in 2017. Two completely different people.
100%.
You're still Jared. You're
Yeah, yeah.
still
At my
Jared.
core, I'm still the same, but yeah,
night and day with a lot of
yeah,
things.
a lot of things have been sprinkled in there that's
yeah,
been
and
an
that's because of the
enhancement for sure.
experiences that you've gotten to experience and the
I
crazy
mean,
people in my life.
let's just list off a few here. Like you said, that was one of them. Trying new food. I will credit you with
Trying new food. But I feel like with food, you were more, when it came to food, you were definitely the most open-minded about it because I feel like you were just like, I'll try anything at least once. You would always say like, I'm going to try it at least once. And honestly, like 7 times out of 10, you actually thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did. And there was a lot of things that I got introduced to, but there's so many things that
just trying to think of other things that
I went to I don't remember exactly when this was, but even going to the Islamic Center with you and your sister, with your dad, and that was different.
Yeah, because you've only seen a church. Like me growing up, we were in a high school where I had a lot of Jewish friends. I had friends who were Catholic, Christian, Baptist, people that were Haitian, and like all different religions. That I've been inside a synagogue, I've been inside a church, I've been inside a mosque. Yeah. So to me, like it's like I was used to seeing different religions and seeing that, but to you, like you only probably saw the inside of like a handful of churches.
I'll say the two biggest things that were the most fascinating, but the most different for me was meeting with your dad, with your dad, and then also, oh wait, was that when we went with your cousins?
Yeah.
Oh, that was awesome. That was actually
yeah. So that was Jared's first time, one, meeting my cousins, and two, we were in Jackson Heights, which is like the most desi you can get, like all like Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Indian, like you're like you feel like you're over there, like you really do. Brown, all you see is brown people everywhere, and he came for like an iftar, which is during Ramadan, everybody's fasting, so there's like big iftars that go, and so we literally went to like this sketchy basement almost type thing.
That was the craziest part, is they let us.
It was like a restaurant,
and then they're like downstairs. I'm like, what?
Yeah, like it was just like tables, really dingy tables, and like just like it was. But the food was amazing, and they came out with all. And Jared saw like the azan, which is like the prayer, and them breaking their fast with the dates, and then just seeing all that. Like that was definitely an experience for sure. And Carla came to that too.
She was with us,
and well. she really enjoyed that as well.
I think my favorite part about all these cultural things is I find them extremely beautiful and a part of the world that I'm so grateful and lucky to have seen. I would have been open-minded and non-judgmental regardless, but being able to be in it gives you a whole different appreciation and perspective on those things.
And it's also a part of the person that you're dating. It makes it almost like a part of you. You feel more like intrigued and more engaged to like get to know it. I feel like if it's just some random person, like
if I just show up there,
you're more connected to it because of me.
Yeah.
So that also I would changes your perspective.
It was and I've always been such a curious person. So it was a beautiful thing to experience, to even not even just experience, to witness, just to kind of see, because it's something that I don't want to use the word ignorant. Like, I'm not ignorant to it on purpose. It's just it's never existed in my world, so it's not something I ever even gave thought to learning about or trying to
I don't think there's
partake
one
in.
Muslim person in Burrillville. I'll probably bet money on that.
If there is, I've never met them. But and honestly, as far as I know, I think your dad was the first Muslim person I ever met.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to see the different cultures. And my thing is like I said, growing up, my parents always taught me to, give love, be kind, and be respectful. So my whole thing is I'm going to just be open-minded and curious. And if I get invited to anything like this.
Can you talk? Sorry to cut you off.
No,
I don't
want
to forget my thought. Can you talk about the first time you met my dad? Because it was just the two of you. Wasn't it?
No, it wasn't. No.
No.
The first time I met your dad, I remember the first time I met both your parents. I know you don't really remember the first time you met mine, but I remember the first time I met both of your parents. So
my mom, just don't tell them.
All right. So the first time I met your mom, and obviously, if you haven't gotten this already, her parents are divorced, and they've been divorced. How long have they been divorced for?
Since I was 14. So you're good at math. What does that mean?
What are you, 26 now? So it's 12 years. So I met your mom probably within a month of dating you because they came to visit you in Providence.
Yeah.
And I remember the first day because you were, I think, at my house with me, and we went to go meet them in Providence at your dorm. They were already there when we got there. And I never met anyone there. So it was your mom, your mom's boyfriend, and I think his sister and her boyfriend. So it was like a weird dynamic.
And they're all just like
they're
warning.
Italian,
and just characters.
And your mom's Puerto Rican, so she has an accent. And I'm just like, oh, this is different. Because, like, he has the Italian accent, I'm from Italy accent, not I'm an Italian American. Well, I mean, he is, but you know what I mean.
Well, he's more like he has like a New York Italian, but also like he's straight off the boat. Like he was born in Sicily, so.
Yeah, so you have the different dynamics.
Yeah.
But I just remember that was a really good day. But that was actually, oh yeah, that was the first time I think I ever went to a restaurant. And I remember, do you remember this? I was actually mortified because I've never seen this once in my life. Now it's like I see it all the time, so it's not a big deal. But we sat down and he didn't like the restaurant's vibe. It had nothing to do with the food or anything like that.
It was the lighting, and it was like the color of the tablecloth.
We got up and left, and I remember Insta Karma. This was the best part of this whole day. The Insta Karma was we sat at this other restaurant, we ate, he didn't like the food there. And then the guy that sat us at the other table came walking by the window, saw us in the window, and pointed. And I was like, this is Insta Karma. He's like, I see you get up. And then he's just like, oh, you got. And
the food at the place that we were at initially was much better.
Yeah, so I just remember that experience. But I remember your mom was super nice. I think I liked your mom immediately. I don't think there was ever a moment.
She was already she already was super excited to meet you because you were my first boyfriend, so it was a big deal to her. Like I had never introduced. Yeah. I mean, she's been introduced to little high school flings, but this is like the first time she's being formally introduced to a boyfriend. So
I don't necessarily remember how deep into dating we were before I met your dad. I know it was a lot longer.
It was a lot longer. I'd say
I think I met your mom a few times. I think I probably even went to Stanford before I met your dad. But I remember the day I met your dad. He was coming back from a business trip, I believe, and he was in Providence. And I remember driving us there, and you were like Korean barbecue. But before that, I remember that he wanted to just talk to you for a little bit. So you were like, it'll be like 20 minutes. And I remember I sat in the car for like an hour and a half. Because I don't think you told him that I was waiting in the car, but I was just sitting in the car waiting. And I'm like, what the fuck are they doing? I'm like, what the fuck are they doing? She told me 20 minutes. It's been an hour and a half, and I'm just sitting here. I got to put more shit in the meter. I'm like, what is going on? But then we ended up having Korean barbecue, like you said. Your dad obviously was super nice, and as most fathers are, it was a little bit more of a drilling of, getting to know you. Who are you? What are your values? All these things. Yeah. Where your mom was more like, hey, whatever. So it was definitely different dynamics.
He was like interrogating you, and she was just like, you know, hey, let's have a conversation.
But that's understandable. I feel like that's a father's job, right? A father's job is to be like, and I think, as far as I know, I'm the first person he's met. No?
Oh yeah, out of all the
guys, so it's definitely a different dynamic. But yeah, no, I remember there was a few times, or at least one time, way later on, that I did go out to dinner with your dad, just him and I had a great time. It was awesome. I loved it.
So talk more about that, because I feel like I don't remember the details. I know you guys went and got sushi or something, or like Asian food.
Yeah. So, and this goes back to, this is what fascinated me about this whole thing, because this is when I was living in Connecticut. It was you and I living together, but there's always this different, this is where the cultures come into play, right? The different, and like I said, I'm open-minded, and I don't want to say I understand, but I try to understand everything, right? I know I can never, if I'm not in the experience, I'm not going to completely understand something. But I remember you always said to me, he kept saying, if you guys are living together, you guys should get married.
Oh yeah.
And
my dad had many conversations with me, sit down conversations, like, if you're going to continue to live with this man, like, you guys need to get married. And I was just like, I'm not going to get married just to make you feel comfortable. I'm sorry.
And this was right before our first breakup.
Mm-hmm.
I know this was.
He just didn't like the fact that we lived together and we weren't married. That's really what it was. And honestly, I don't even think he actually cared. He cared more about what other people would think.
Yeah.
Especially people in his family and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I remember at this point, we were close to being broken up. We haven't had the discussion yet, but we were kind of in a place where we were kind of just going through the motions. I felt like we were probably going to break up soon, but I wasn't completely sure. So when he asked me to dinner, and I went, and we went to Greenwich, and we did go to an Asian restaurant. We ordered some sushi, which was cool.
Wait, but get more into detail about, so you met each other. Was it awkward at all?
No. Nope. Wasn't awkward at all. I mean, I think I was a little nervous on my way there because I hadn't spent any alone time with him, so I wasn't sure what we were going to talk about.
Any alone time with him.
And not that your dad, like, I just don't know your dad well enough to know what can I joke around with him about.
And you can't have a drink with him. He's not the type of person you can kind of curse and be kind of like, you got to, with my dad, you got to watch
more mindful.
What you say.
Very more mindful.
He's a chill dude. Don't get me wrong. He's a laid back dude, but you have to be more mindful of what exactly. You have to be.
So with your mom, it's almost like anything goes. You can say whatever you want. You can drink whatever you want. You're going to laugh and say a bunch. Not that your dad's not funny. Me and your dad did have some laughs, and it was a good time. I was more.
It's more of a conservative vibe.
Yeah. I was more nervous on my drive there, saying, what are we going to talk? I have no idea what we're going to talk about. I did know. I had a feeling, just because of how many times you told me that he kept mentioning marriage, that he was going to be like,
I can't believe
he goes, do you know why? He did. He goes, do you know why I asked you to dinner? And I go, I think I know. And I mentioned it. He goes,
Was this in the beginning of the dinner or at the end of dinner that he said
End of dinner.
Okay, so you guys just had a conversation. It was fine. Nothing, it was just like back and
Nothing
forth.
Crazy,
and then it ended, and he said, so tell me what he said, though, to you.
He goes, you know what I'm going to ask you, right? And I just said, yeah, I think I have an idea. And I think it was almost like, you know what I'm talking about. I know what you're talking about. And he was just like, I'm not telling you to do it, but consider it, is what he was basically saying. But in a nice way. He wasn't like, hey, consider it. He was just like, hey,
if you're going to continue living with my daughter, then,
but in the back of my mind, I knew we were on our way out of this relationship. At least I felt that way. My intuition told me that it was only a matter of time, unless we really made some drastic changes in our relationship, that we weren't going to be together long enough for this conversation to be relevant. And sure enough, I was correct. But I just was like, but it was a great time. We did have a good time. But when it comes to talking with your dad, it's more talks about life and finances and careers and
interests.
Things of that nature, which is fine. I don't mind having that conversation. And then conversations with your mom, there's sometimes like that.
You can talk about sex and go and like, it's literally
it's more of a free for all with your mom. I would say, but I loved spending time with both of them. I think they were both like, I didn't have a bad experience with either of them. if I'm being
It's
honest.
a kind of nice of a balancing act for me because, like, it's nice that I can have a little bit of both. Like, it's nice that I can have a cocktail with my mom and fuck around
Yep.
with my mom and goof off with my mom. And my dad, too, has a good sense of humor. Like, he'll
Yeah, he
joke
does.
around with me. Like, he told me the other day, like, he's going to buy me new tires for my birthday, all 4 tires. And he wants to
Woo!
get my car detailed. He was like,
Oh,
yeah, we need to,
it's because it's that stinky weed in there.
he said, we need to remove all the hashish
That's what he
smell because
said. All that
he always
stinky
calls
weed.
weed hashish. You
All
got to
your
get rid
stinky
of all the
weed.
hashish in your car. I was like, there's not even a lot of hashish. But yeah,
I can't
so
wait until the captions try to spell that word.
hashish, hashish, hashisha. Hashish isn't even though weed. Hashish is something specific. Let me see. Hashish,
Hashish
also
makes me
known
think
as
it's like,
hash, is a
yeah.
drug cannabis plants, flower. I just want to know what specifically hashish means. Is it just weed or is it?
Dude, you're
I
asking
guess
the
it
wrong
is.
guy.
I guess it is.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, as
He
potent
was
form of
correct all along.
cannabis.
He was
I
correct
thought
all
it was,
along.
I just thought it was funny that he always calls it hashish. Hash is what's different versus weed. Whatever the fuck that means.
We're all learning a lot today.
But yeah, and I think that, you know, for people who are in a relationship with another person that comes from a different culture, a different background, a different environment, I just feel like this is something that you need to discuss early on because we waited until it was kind of like a point of no return, especially like that night that I blew up after like it was a night at Gators. I don't remember what specific night that was when I really
Oh,
kind
I
of just
do.
erupted and was like, I don't feel comfortable here. This life here is just so different from me.
Yeah.
And I kind of just it was kind of like an explosion of emotions because I had held it in for so long.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of alcohol involved and I was definitely drunk. And it just kind of exploded. That was
I
like I think our
remember this night.
first ever big or no,
This
that was
was
after the Stanford night.
Yeah, but this was
This wasn't like that. It was a different type of
no. So this is before we even moved in together. No, we were living here together, but
I
we
was
weren't.
no,
We were
I
living
was
in
living in
Barterville, I think.
Burrville. I was
Yeah, but
living
you weren't living in Warwick yet. We were living in Barterville.
No, yeah, we were living in Burrville.
But I remember all right, so this is what's interesting is I remember that vividly and I remember the different point of views as time went on and we learned and actually had discussion. This is why, and I know it's tough sometimes, but my advice for everyone out there is don't be afraid to be vulnerable with each other because we all have insecurities. We all have a certain type of ego. We all have these things that maybe we don't love about ourselves or that we feel inferior towards our partner in certain aspects. And it's okay to talk about those things because if you don't, they come back to bite you in the ass. And this is one of those scenarios where we lacked the ability at this moment in time to have the conversation to understand each other. And what I mean by
We
that
weren't
is
understanding each other on both
we weren't,
ends. We were
well,
not.
we weren't even trying to,
Yeah.
because in life, whatever my experience of life and your experience of life is completely different. And there's so many factors that go into that. You and I could have grown up in a very similar household in a very similar area and done almost identical things, but our version of that in our head and what we tell ourselves what each moment in our life meant is going to alternate our experience. Obviously, we didn't grow up the same. We grew up polar opposite, and those factor in. But I don't think we had the relationship maturity to be able to sit down and be like, I don't know why this is a big deal to you.
But that's for a
But
lot of people in relationships
yes,
and our
that's
age.
why this is why this is my advice is talk about it. Don't be afraid to be a little vulnerable. And I think that it took us a long time. This goes back to communication, which is a whole other thing. But I remember that night vividly, and I remember how it started.
I don't even remember the details of
I do.
what happened.
I think you were feeling that way, but you didn't voice your opinion about feeling that way. And what happened is we went out, and it was I don't know if it was Thanksgiving Eve, but it was around Thanksgiving. It might have been Thanksgiving. No, it was Thanksgiving Eve.
It was Thanksgiving Eve.
So we went out to the bar, and I remember you wanted to smoke when we got there. And we had gone to the dispensary, so we had pre-rolled tubes. But I just reached into my drawer and grabbed the tube, and when we got there, it happened to be empty. And I remember I don't think you were so much blaming me as much as this was misplaced emotion, where you were feeling like you said, and you basically were like, you didn't bring that on purpose. I was like, I swear to God, I didn't know the tube was empty. I thought there was a joint in here. And I think you just almost, I don't want to say needed to smoke to get through the night, but I felt like you were so kind of fed up and so homesick and so felt out of place that it was misplaced emotions. And in my head at the time, I'm like, why are you being an asshole? Because I'm like, why is this such a big deal? Without saying like, okay, what's actually going on here? Because if anyone gets mad, it's usually not about the thing that made them explode. It's usually things that they built up over time. There's a reason behind every behavior that every single person does.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be able to understand or ask the questions of, okay, this probably has nothing to do with me. Let's delve a little deeper into it. And I don't think it had anything to do with me. I think it had a lot to do with, like you said, you were feeling homesick. You didn't feel like you were fitting in, or not that you weren't fitting in. I feel like you get along with everybody fine, but it was just out of place, right? It's such a different environment for you. And in my head, it was like, how can you feel out of place? You went from this extreme busy to slow. Shouldn't that be easier? Where it's not a one for one thing. It's just like, just as different as me going to where you grew up is for me, even though it's going to more busy and more chaos in a sense, the same way it's equal, just the opposite for you. It doesn't make it any less
Yeah.
I don't know what the word is, any less as big, right? It doesn't make it any not as significant, I guess.
Yeah.
Because it's going in the opposite way. And I just remember that blow up. That's how it started, but I think, like you said, it's misplaced emotions a lot of the times. A lot of the arguments people are getting in, it's misplaced emotions because they're afraid to be vulnerable.
Yeah. So, and that goes to like how we think we should have handled it. You know, I think that we should have been more. You were always a way better communicator than me. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Definitely when it came to your anxiety and stuff like that, you were hiding it in the beginning because you didn't want to feel like you were, you know, like a little
I didn't want to be
bitch.
judged. Yeah. I didn't want to be judged. And I didn't want to, like you said, feel like, what the fuck's wrong with this guy? Oh my God, I have to put up with this.
But I think you also saw that I was understanding with a lot of things, especially stuff that you were feeling anxious about. Like I would react in a way that was like more supportive. That's what I'd like to think, especially in the beginning.
Well, yes and no. I think long term, yes. I think at the beginning, the same thing that I couldn't understand in that moment, where some of our arguments, especially when we were in Stanford, and like maybe I was there for a weekend or something, and we'd be going out, and I'd be uncomfortable. And to you, you're like, "The fuck's this guy's problem?" Where to me, I am like, "Holy shit, what the fuck's going on?" And it's so normal for you. You're like, "I don't get what your issue is." And I think as time we learned that
it just sucked because like we would go out and you were just not wanting to be there.
And I would
like
try.
You were
So
not wanting to be there.
Can I paint
and
this picture
tell
for you?
That you didn't want to be there, which is tough for me, for someone who enjoys this so much, and like, it just sucked that like, you know, the person that I care about the most and love the most, like, is just not on the same page when it comes to that, which doesn't make any of us a bad person. It's just
no. And I think we eventually got there. I think we eventually got there. Maybe not to the same extent, but a lot better with it.
Close enough.
But here's what I will say for me about that is, it's not that I didn't want to be there. I wanted desperately to enjoy myself, but my anxiety, I guess, it wasn't just anxiety. It was just so much of an extremely end of the like a different end of the spectrum than what I was used to, that it was like a sensory overload. And as much as I wanted to enjoy it, it's almost like myself wouldn't let myself. Like I was like, oh, I like, deep down, I'm like, why am I not enjoying this? Please enjoy it. Find a way to enjoy it. Find a way to enjoy it. Find a way to enjoy it. And I couldn't. So here I am looking miserable as fuck, where I'm just sitting there almost caught between a rock and a hard place. Like you just said, the person that I care about the most, I want to make them happy. Unfortunately, the one thing that they want me to do in this moment to make them happy also makes me feel crazy anxious. So now it's me fighting. I want to do something for them, but it's also complete opposite of what my body feels like it wants to do. So I'm like, and then you're kind of just like in no man's land.
And all my friends would just be like, I don't understand how you're with someone like this who can't go out, who doesn't want to. They're just like, this is so not you. Like, how are you even
Yeah.
And it was something that we were able to kind of work through. But I think in the end, it was definitely a big deal breaker for us. Our like we said in the first
Yeah.
episode, our
Just our lifestyle
lifestyles
differences
and just how we like to live life and, how we see our future is just very different.
Do you think if we and I think inevitably it probably would have all been the same. Do you think it would have been a lot easier to manage if we were better at communicating early on and understanding the differences and almost being like having a strategy, you think, to be
I
able
think
to
it would
work
have
through those things?
avoided. I think it would have avoided certain outbursts and things that happened later on. But I
Yeah.
do think eventually that it was
Yeah,
always going to
inevitably.
come
Yeah.
down to that. I don't
Yeah.
care how much you communicate or this and that. You can communicate it to each other, but if those facts don't
Yeah.
change, which
Oh,
you can't
100%.
change, what we wanted was to change each other. And yes, people
Yeah.
can change for the better in certain things, but
Yeah.
at this point, this is like who we are, and we can't change
Yeah.
who we are.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think that it just
I
really came
completely
down to
agree.
that at the
I
end of the
completely
day.
agree. But I do think that, at least speaking for myself here, that all those experiences as time went on, I definitely get a lot more comfortable. I would say to a point where I don't want to say took pride in it, but like I was very happy to be around the different kind of, because I would say Stanford's almost like a melting pot of a whole bunch of different cultures. And I
It
was
is.
very excited to be in that and to kind of see all the different things. And every time we met people out or that you knew that I met, like I always jived with them all. Like it was always like one of those things where, I enjoyed meeting people and doing those things. I think the biggest thing for me is just as time went on, we got better with it. But a lot of people say that I have an old soul. I like, different things. I love reading books. I love having deep,
Yu-Gi-Oh
meaningful
cards.
deep, meaningful conversations, right? And there was always moments where if it was just you and I understand it more now, like as time goes on and I can see things for what they are. But when I was in it, I would always say, I don't understand the appeal here. Like if it was just you and I and we weren't meeting other people out and we go into a really, really, really loud place to have drinks and stuff and we can't even have a conversation, in my head I'm like, what are we doing? Wouldn't it make more sense to have a nice dinner
We
with a
like to
glass of wine?
dance. We like to dance. So like
Yeah.
this is the thing. I like to do that.
Yeah.
I love to have a nice
Yeah.
intimate dinner where you can have cocktails and be able to talk and that there's two different levels. There's
Oh,
doing
100%.
that and then going out. And I feel
Yeah.
like to you like it was either one or the other and the other was not what you were with. Like for
Yeah.
me it's like, "Oh, we can do that." And then one night it might just be going out and dancing and just loud music and like no, it's not a night to talk. It's a night to just vibe and dance and
You want to know what's
chill.
hilarious?
So
Is
what?
like 2 weekends ago, that was me
You
out
see?
out stomping the yard with the
Who would have
boys.
thought?
But I know, honestly, it's funny because I thought of you and I'm like, she probably never in a million years thought I'd be doing this right now. And
Yeah, because you would never even join your friends when they would go to Providence. It was something you very much avoided.
I'm a homebody. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love going out, but not for me. It's one of those things where if I go out, I'm going to have fun. It's going to happen, and I know I'm going to have fun. It's inevitable. Listen, it's different with the boys, but when I go
Definitely
out,
different with the boys.
also like when I go out, I always have a good time. It's always one of those things for me where you just got to get me out, and then I'm good. Because I'm a weird mix of I'm an extrovert, but I'm also an introvert. Like I love my alone time. I love reading. I love thinking. I'm a thinker. I love sitting down. I love being creative. I love thinking up ideas. I love reflecting on life, learning, growing. Like those are things that I love to do. And I also enjoy having drinks, having a good time, laughing a lot. You know me, I love to laugh. That's one of my things.
You're a goofball.
100%. I love making people laugh. I would say that that's one thing I've always had since I was a child is, can I make people smile? Can I make people laugh in whatever way possible? And that's something that has never left me. I mean, I think sometimes it becomes a detriment to where I care too much about other people's happiness that I neglect my own sometimes. But I would say through our relationship and these different cultures meshing, I've learned a lot. I've come out of my shell a lot. I'm
You've
definitely
grown. You've
more
definitely
open.
grown.
I mean, even when I came to visit, I'm more open to going out and doing things now. I'm not
Oh
so.
yeah, completely. Oh, you're with it. You're with it. You're not gonna go out and go clubbing, but you're definitely with like the
I'm
bar
getting a little old
hopping
for clubbing.
scene. And me too, though. Honestly, like I'm Spanish, so I like to go out and dance Spanish.
Yeah.
That's like what I like to do, and that's different. Or like house music, kind of vibing, like.
Yeah.
But and I like to do it once in a blue moon nowadays. Like I used to do it every weekend. Now I like to do it maybe once a month or once every 2 months.
Yeah.
Because
Now,
then
see, I like doing that with a group. If it was just like
yeah,
two
yeah,
people,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not
Me
so
too.
into it.
Me
But
too.
if
Me
it's
too. I
like a
like doing it
group,
with a group.
I'm cool
I
with it.
think though the biggest takeaway from this episode, and I'll say my piece and you can say yours, so we could wrap it
Yeah.
up.
Sure.
I definitely feel that, like for me, and I think everything is situational. Like I think that my next forever relationship, I want somebody who did have more of an upbringing that was similar to mine,
Yeah.
and someone that kind of shares those, like having like a foreign family and like all that. Do I think that that makes or break a relationship? No. I definitely do think that it's possible for two people from two completely different backgrounds,
Yeah.
growing up in two different
We shouldn't have
environments.
lasted as long as we did.
They can make it work. They really can. I think it's just a matter of making sure that you
Yeah.
align on those core values at the end of the day, because a lot of that stuff can be talked through and worked through. But I think that there's just certain things that you can't, and it's better to figure it out earlier on. You don't want to do it too early. You want to make sure that this is someone that is worth getting to that step.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest takeaway is just making sure you align, and whatever works for you works for you.
Yeah.
And don't let your parents and your family's either judgment or potential they won't think that this person's right for you because of their culture or their background. Screw that shit. You got to do stuff for you. And yes, your family's opinion on your partner is very important. But at the end of the day, you are going to be the one going to sleep with this person every single night, starting a family with this person, living the rest of your life with this person. So you really can't just be like, oh, my dad's not going to like him, so screw it. I think that thing really, that bothers me a lot. Like, live for yourself.
Oh, 100%.
So what would be your takeaway?
For me, I would say the number one thing that's important that I've learned through our relationship and just life in general is awareness, self-awareness, and understand where you may be not on the same level as someone else, and then also being aware and okay with the fact that it's okay. Just be open-minded and be willing to grow and listen. I think the biggest thing in a relationship, in life, and anything is the ability to listen, the ability to say, I don't understand this. That doesn't make it wrong. It makes it different, but it doesn't make it wrong. And I'm going to do my best
to disagree.
100%. I'm going to do my best to understand this for what it is, because I look at all of our disagreements, especially early on, came from a lack of understanding, a lack of us being vulnerable enough with each other because we didn't want to voice our shortcomings or voice our insecurities, or we didn't want the other person to think a certain thing about us, or at least I'm going to speak for me in this case. I don't know if you felt the same way, but there were certain things that I felt like I had shortcomings in that I didn't want to bring up or that I didn't want to mention because I was afraid of judgment, of saying, oh, this bothers this person. I don't know if I want to be with that person. But if you don't voice that, they'll never understand. And if they can't understand, they're not open-minded and they judge you for that, they're not the right person.
Someone that accepts you.
100%. So be vulnerable. It's okay. Be open. Everybody has insecurities. They may not be the same insecurities as your partner, but I guarantee you that every damn person on this earth has things that they are insecure about. So it's okay. And just, they're your partner. Work through things together. Talk things out.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Are they going to do things that you don't like? Yes. But that's okay. You can work through them together. And half the time, they do things without knowing that they're doing it. And if you don't tell them that it bothers you, they're never going to know and they're never going to stop the behavior. So just work through stuff together. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable and communicate your shortcomings.
Keywords: vulnerability.
Yes.
Communication.
Yes. And there'll be episodes on all of these things.
Aligning with each other. And taking the time to really get to know each other.
Because this didn't work out between her and I but because of our different backgrounds, where we grew up, and the way our parents were, we both, I think, gained a lot of perspective, and it was a beautiful experience that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world, because I'm a lot better for it. Even though that this didn't work out, I'm a lot better for it, because I learned a lot, I grew a lot, I became a lot more comfortable with things that I was super uncomfortable about, and that's my biggest
now
thing.
we have a podcast.
And now we have a podcast giving advice on things that we think we should have done better, things that we think didn't work, and our advice to you to say, hey, catch on to this a lot earlier than we did. We went through the shit, so you don't have to. Straight up.
Yep. That's a beautiful way to end it.
Straight up. So we're going to end it there. Thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate all the listeners that we have. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please, 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 if you enjoyed it, give it a review.
5
many
stars.
stars. Yeah, 5 stars if you think it's worthy. If not, then, rate it appropriately. But yeah, please, 5 stars.
5 stars. I will find you and I will do things to you.
We are on Instagram, TikTok. We are on YouTube, Spotify, podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, we will be there. We really thank you, everyone who's been listening. And honestly, enjoy this theme song.
Oh, shit.
I should have said that in the beginning, but...
No, I like it at the end.
Enjoy this theme song.
Conversations with my ex, yes, it had to end. Dated for 5 years, now we really good friends. Conversations with my ex, talking love and life, the dating ins and outs, sharing some dope advice. We gon' keep it honest, never hold back with my comments. I done learned a